So earlier this week, one of my greatest fears came to pass, and it really got me thinking about failure. We talk a lot about success, but we don't talk a lot about failure, whether because we're scared to or because we don't have the answers. But I want to talk to you in this video about the number one reason why most men fail. So let's talk about what happened. And just to reassure you, nobody died or is dying. I'm not bankrupt and destitute and going to be living on the street. It's not that much of a tragedy. However, it is something that I've feared for almost my entire life. So what did happen? I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, as some of you know I do, and I got caught in a knee lock and I did my knee. I got a potentially serious knee injury. I'll find out the diagnosis tomorrow, so I don't know exactly how bad it is. But growing up in the 90s as an athlete, this is a fear, right? I heard over and over again, ESPN SportsCenter, ACL, career-ending injury. It's not as bad these days as it once was, but serious knee injuries are very, very serious. In fact, one of my things that I said when I started doing jiu-jitsu is I want to not have major surgeries and I want to not have injuries that linger for the rest of my life. And, this potentially is exactly that. I want the use of my body. I want to be healthy and strong and able to move physically, and, there's a chance that I could lose that. Granted, it's a small chance. Hopefully I'll be all right. And probably I'll recover fully, but there is a chance. So the first few days after injuring my knee, I was not a real fun person to talk to. I was just bummed and I just wanted to be left alone. But then a thought occurred to me. As I started to live with my injured knee, I realized the one thing I really missed in life was playing my sport. That's it, right? I mean, I can live life with a bum knee. I can limp up to a girl and take her home, no problem. I can still work out, I can still stay fit, I can still keep good body composition, I can still live for a very long time. What does having your knee messed up really hurt? It hurts your ability to play the sport. And if I had not played the sport in the first place, I would never have gotten the knee injury. But then again, I'd be in the exact same position as having the knee injury, which is I'm missing out on using my body in a way that I love. I'm missing out on an experience in life. But it's very interesting because in a lot of areas of life, there are legitimate risks, there are legitimate setbacks, and there's legitimate reason to be scared of certain things happening. But most of the time, the thing you're most scared of is actually better than if you chose not to live life in the first place. An abundance of caution, or let's say an overabundance of caution, living your life in fear is worse than the worst case outcome of that fear in probably more than 90% of cases. So I want to talk about that phenomenon, how it's affecting you in your life, and especially you with women. So let's start with another personal experience of mine, this one actually having to do with women. When I was in middle school, I went to health class, and they told me about sexually transmitted diseases, and they scared the living shit out of me. I was terrified that if I ever had sex, I would get some awful disease that would stick with me for the entirety of my life, probably kill me, and definitely make it so that nobody wanted to have sex with me ever again or marry me. And I was legitimately actually scared of having sex. So throughout my time in high school, I wanted a girlfriend. More so, I wanted to know that girls liked me and to feel validated by that. But I actually didn't want to have sex. I actually did not have desire to have sex with girls in high school, even though I was turned on by them, even though I watched porn, even though, of course, all the normal male shit. And so the motivation for me to actually pursue a relationship was definitely dampened. And had I been in a relationship, it would have been a little bit of a weird one, to be honest. So I was scared of STDs, and that stunted my relationship growth. It kept me from meeting women. It kept me from taking the risks to develop relationships. It kept me from experiencing a lot of personal growth they would have experienced that I had to wait until later to actually have happen. And if you think about it logically, what is the real risk of STDs? Okay, yeah, there are a couple really serious ones that honestly, if you're having safe sex, are pretty hard to catch. And then there's a bunch of minor ones that mostly can be wiped out by antibiotics. And the only real lingering one you would get, the major consequence of it is that it would be really awkward and you'd have to tell a potential partner about it, and it could make future relationships a little more awkward. So the solution of having no sex and no relationships to avoid an STD doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Because again, the loss you would have by an STD would be a little bit of awkwardness in a relationship. That's mainly it. So to spend years of my life not having relationships because I was afraid of a sexually transmitted disease makes no sense. On top of which, if you think about it, at some point, if I do want to get married, if I do want to have success with women, I'm going to have to start having relationships. All I'm doing is delaying it. I'm going to take that exact same risk a few years later, right? So instead of starting to date and experience women at 15, 16, I'm starting at like 18, 19, something like that, or maybe even older. It's still gonna be the same risk at some point once I start. And of course, when I do start, and when I did start, I was safe. I used condoms, I did what I could to try and protect myself, as you should. But avoiding life in order to avoid the negative consequences of life does not lead to positive outcomes. It leads to a life unlived. So as a result, I had lots of times when I didn't perform as well sexually, or I wasn't as good in bed, or I missed an opportunity with a girl I really liked because of my inexperience. And guess what? Now that I've made love with hundreds of women, I still have yet to catch an STD. Knock on wood, that continues. But being safe, taking precautions, has put me in a pretty good spot. And in those 20 years, I've had amazing relationships with incredible women that I will remember until the day I die. Would I give all that up to be an STD-free virgin, as opposed to, it turns out, an STD-free non-virgin? Or would I give all that up to avoid a course or two of penicillin? No, I absolutely would not give it up. That would have been a horrible life decision. So let's talk about failure in a way that probably affects you. And here I'm going to talk about approach anxiety. Have you ever had it? I'm betting you have. I'm betting at some point in your life you've seen that incredibly attractive girl you really want to go talk to, and you didn't for whatever reason. Whatever bullshit excuse you gave yourself, you didn't go do the approach. Fundamentally, you were scared. Scared of failure, maybe. Scared of success, maybe. Scared of not knowing what happens next, maybe. But in the end, scared of either failure now or failure later. And did that make your life better? Did not going over and talking to her make your life better? Well, it avoided a little bit of awkwardness. It may have avoided a little bit of short-term pain. Hopefully, it gave you more short-term pain because you were so pissed at yourself from not approaching. That was probably worse than whatever would have come from the approach. But yes, it would have saved you from a socially awkward experience temporarily. But really, if you look at it, what does not approaching get you? If you were to approach and had your worst outcome, what happens? You talk to the girl and you didn't get a date with her. If you don't approach, what happened? You didn't get a date with her. And at the same time, not approaching is still worse because you still have to look at yourself in the mirror afterwards and know you gave up, and know you quit on yourself, and know that you let yourself down. One mantra I live my life by and encourage you to live your life by as well: it's okay if the girl rejects you, but you had better not reject yourself. And I knew this pain as well. From age, say 11 until 18 or so, I had approach anxiety and didn't approach over and over and over again. And every time I wanted to talk to a girl and I didn't, I felt like less of a man because of it. When I finally started doing approaches, a lot of them didn't go well, some of them went well, but every single time I was exhilarated and happy that I had approached because I knew that no longer was I rejecting myself. It actually felt better to get that rejection than to get the non-rejection of walking away. But on a practical level, if you don't do the approach, you are ensuring the worst outcome of the approach, which is nothing. No chance. Zero probability of that girl being a future relationship for you. So there is no point whatsoever in not doing the approach. However, the fear keeps you from it. And actually, getting back to the title of this video, the number one reason, therefore, that most men fail with women is fear of failure with women. That fear of failure stops you from taking action, which ensures the very failure you're afraid of. So let's do a little thought experiment. We've all imagined an embarrassing rejection. We've all imagined a cold approach not going the way it should have. We've all imagined being in a conversation, not knowing what to say, and it's a little awkward, and then you leave with your tail between your legs. We've all imagined that, I'm sure. Let's imagine the alternative of not going after what you want. Let's imagine the alternative of never going up and talking to that girl you really want to talk to. Well, in that case, you're destined to either die alone or settle for whatever girl will have you. Probably she won't be the greatest for you, and also you're always going to wonder what if. You're always going to wonder what could have been. Could I have done more? Could my life partner have been someone better and more compatible for me? That's not a choice I would want to deal with. That's far worse than any rejection. But people don't think about that. People think about the instantaneous rejection. They don't think about the long-term failure. The long-term failure should also be in your reckoning. You should also be factoring that in, and that should terrify you. Yeah, you get rejected by a girl, whatever, it's a little unpleasant. You fail at life, fail at relationships, live your life with someone who's not ideal for you or die alone. That's the thing that should terrify you. Here's another critical example of men choosing a path of failure. And this is one I've been seeing more and more recently with the sort of cynicism in social media over relationships. A lot of men are terrified of being in a relationship and being cheated on. And fair enough. Women do cheat. It does happen. It can happen. And so can I guarantee you in a relationship you'll never get cheated on? I absolutely cannot guarantee that. However, the solution that a lot of men take to this is to, because they're scared of getting cheated on, never get into a relationship. And that really is a case of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You're throwing out the good with the bad to the extent that your overall outcome is worse than if the bad had happened. Now, I'm not minimizing getting cheated on. It sucks and it hurts, but it doesn't tangibly, physically hurt you. It hurts you emotionally, and it's something you will move on from. You will have other relationships. You will have other positive things happen. And unless you're actually married and having kids with a girl, unless you're at that level, getting cheated on fundamentally doesn't really hurt you. You break up with a girl, you move on, you find a better girl, you realize you made a poor choice, you realize you made a mistake, and in the meantime, you had some fun times, you had some good sex, you learned some things about yourself, you grew, and now you can go meet another more eligible girl. Contrast that to never getting into a relationship, therefore not having the chance of getting into a serious relationship, marriage, kids, all of the wonderful things that come with that. Also missing out on the deep, wonderful connections that can come from relationships, and also missing out on the personal growth for yourself that can come from being in a relationship. So yeah, you could get cheated on. It could happen. There are things you can do to mitigate it. There are things you can do to be a better boyfriend. There are things you can do to be cautious and safe and smart about all that. But you know what? It could still happen. But in the end of the day, would you rather be a guy that lived your life having a variety of wonderful relationships and occasionally got cheated on, or being a guy who had no relationships with women? Between those two, that's not even a choice for me. That's not even an option between the two. Obviously, have the relationships, live life, have a little bit of bumps and bruises along the way. Which brings me to the topic of risk, both in relationships and in life. Look, everything you do in life has some risk associated with it. If you get in the car and drive to the grocery store, there's a chance some drunk dude will sideswipe you and kill you. It could happen. But what's the solution? Never leave your house? I mean, if you want to, you could order your groceries, but do you want to also never go out and meet your friends? Never go to an amusement park? Never go see the world? Never travel? That's not living a life anymore at this point. So you have to accept a certain amount of risk in your life. And what should you do? Drive safely. Wear a seatbelt. Check your rearview mirror. Don't maybe drive at 3 a.m. where there are drunk people on the road as often. But you know what? Eventually, you just have to say, life has a certain amount of risk inherent in it. If I'm going to live life, I accept the risk, I do what I can to mitigate it, and then if bad shit happens, I say, you know what? I knew the risk, I'm happy to take it, I would make the same decision again. Another great example in life of fear of failure leading to failure comes in the world of investing. There are a lot of guys who are so scared of losing money that they sit with all their money in cash, never make an investment, and they're actually guaranteed failure. They're guaranteed to not have their money compound, which means they'll stay kind of relatively mediocre, if not poor. And in fact, they're basically guaranteed that their money is losing value due to inflation every single year. So the very fear of failure guarantees failure. Whereas if you were to just put your money in the market in general, over a decently long period of time, you will almost always do better than if you had it in cash. So the fear of taking a risk actually in a way is the biggest risk. So what's my point? What's the final takeaway of all this? Takeaway is this. You should be smart, you should take precautions, but at the end of the day, you have to live life. You cannot go around in your life worrying about every little thing that might happen. Because most of the time, the things that are going to happen are not that bad. And most of the time, the bad things that will happen are actually not nearly as bad as what would have happened with inaction. Usually, if you mess up in relationships, the worst consequence you could get is still better than having never had relationships. If you don't play sports to not get an injury, you're losing so much by not playing the sports, you may as well have gotten a bunch of injuries along the way. You would have had a happier life. And if you're scared of all the things that could happen to you in relationships and that keeps you out of relationships, well, you've just consigned yourself to missing out on one of the absolute best elements of the entire human experience. That is a sacrifice nobody should have to make. So the point is this, live your life. Decide what you want and go after it. Do it as safely as you can, take the precautions you can, but end of the day, do all the calculations, make your best course, and then you know what? If some shit goes wrong, you say, hey, I accounted for that, I took it into the equation, I got a little unlucky, I can live with that. I can look myself in the eye and be proud of what I did, even if things didn't go my way every single time. And I promise you, if you do this sort of intelligent risk-taking and going after what you want in life, you will have failures. I promise you, you'll have failures, but you'll have so many successes of such great magnitude, the failures will not matter. And more to the point, you will avoid the biggest failure, which is looking back on your deathbed and regretting and wondering what if. I don't want any of you in the audience to be on your deathbed thinking back to this video and thinking, Todd told me to take action, I didn't take action, and I regret it. This is your wake-up call. No excuse. I've told you, you can't pretend you don't know. Go after what you want. Take risks. Take intelligent risks, but do take the risks you need to succeed in life and to have the life you want. So that's today's video, and you may have noticed that while it is about women, it's also about life. If you like hearing my insights about life in general as well as women, you might also want to check out my podcast. I'll put a link in the description. Check it out at that link. I talk about all kinds of topics I'm not at liberty to talk about on YouTube, and also a lot of things that are very important to life, but not necessarily always game. Hope you enjoy it. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Take care.